Welcome to Dependable Flame, where we explore vintage petrol lighters, ashtrays, tobacconiana, and other useful mechanisms. Make yourself at home. Today I have an item that I would really just like to talk about. I acquired this item in a group of 37 tobacconiana items. I believe it was 26 lighters and 11 cutters like this Cigarillo cutter. It was a solid gold piercer, cigar piercer. There were sterling silver lighters, World War II era Black Crackle Zippo lighter, some of the coolest and most expensive lighters I've owned. But many of the items in that collection had the initials or the name J.J. Clark, who I came to understand was a Navy admiral who was actually an Oklahoma native and a fellow Cherokee Indian, Joseph James Jocko Clark, who served in World War I and by World War II was a commander of Navy ships. I'm not an expert on those kind of military things, but I encountered a portrait of Admiral J.J. Clark. Well, we not only share a home state and Cherokee heritage, but also first name of Joseph. And I encountered him in a hallway in the Oklahoma State Senate, in the Oklahoma State Capitol building. And that was very interesting to me to walk in there and see that portrait after having owned a collection that had several items that I believed to have belonged to him. Several military presentation items that were definitely engraved and presented to him, along with some militarily significant lighters, including one with a World War II surrender coin, USS Missouri lighter. That one had a repaired hinge, but was a mid to late 1940s lighter, I believe, that it later had a 5-barrel hinge replaced and put on it. There was a Thorns single claw, and that is actually where we acquired the paperwork that you have seen so often in some of our different publications. This has been reproduced and used as part of our background, as well as you can see down here as part of the floor of our video set was the back of that single claw paperwork. I don't remember there being a lot of boxes in that 27 lighter lot, but I do remember there being some paperwork, including that Thorns pamphlet, as well as a little pamphlet for a gold-filled, engine-turned, full-size Zippo lighter from, I think, the 1950s or maybe the early 1960s. Either way, it was a really cool collection. And whether or not the whole collection had belonged to Admiral Joseph James Jocko Clark, or whether someone else had just acquired his collection or his personal belongings at some point and added to theirs. Either way, it is really cool to me to have owned it and then later to have found out the significance. I knew at the time, and I think if I went back and looked at the old videos for some of those pieces, I might have even stated that he was a fellow Oklahoman and may have even known that he was a fellow Cherokee Indian. But it was still such, or seemed like such a coincidence to be walking into that hall of the Capitol building that day in the Oklahoma State Senate, and to see that portrait just staring me in the face. Knew it looked familiar, looked down at the name, and sure enough, Admiral Joseph James Jocko Clark. But that's some of the interesting things that you run into with buying old lighters to repair, to sell, to collect, whatever it is that you choose to do with them, whatever it is that your business in the vintage lighter hobby is. Where I know that there are plenty where it is purely to collect, and for them to even mention otherwise seems like an error in thinking. But for many, including myself, our entry into the vintage lighter hobby was as a seller. So there's plenty of ways that people can get interested in old items, and there are plenty of old items when it comes to, you get involved in a hobby because of the lighters and you like repairing the mechanisms and firing them up and using them for your own personal intentions. But then to run into other items that are somewhat related, maybe still in the Tobacciana realm, little cigarillo cutter like this, and I really just want to show it off. It's the last thing that I believe I owned from that entire lot, which was so cool. All of the other implements, except for maybe, I can't remember now, a Solinger, is that the right name? It seems like it was Solinger cigar cutter that was maybe just kind of a, the name brand was fairly good, but it wasn't solid gold, it wasn't sterling silver. Most of the tools and implements that were in that, other than lighter, many of the lighters were sterling silver, silver plated, gold filled, you know, not just chrome plated brass or whatever. There were plenty that were. Obviously the Black Crackle would have been steel. The Thorn single claw, that would have been chrome plated brass, I believe. But I have looked this thing over and over and over, and I don't see any hallmarks. You guys have heard me talk so often about not being a metals expert, so you know, I don't really even know what to make of the fact that some of these surfaces appear to be silverish in tone, like the blade there, and the handles, everything else appears to be a brass, bronze, or goldish tone. Also appears to be sort of some discoloration like you might see as a tarnish, or maybe even if it had been heated, which I don't think this has. But again, I don't see any hallmarks. I'm curious if anybody knows who the maker might be or has seen a similar cutter. I think this is what you would rightly call a cigarillo cutter. Not very big. Here you've got a zebra pin and fits in there with just a little bit to spare, but not much. So obviously this would not be good for big cigars. I don't even know if a Swisher Sweet would fit through there. But I would be curious for any information that anybody can share, or any insights as to what the metal might be, how I should list it. That's really the question here. What is it, and how is it best described? I believe it's a cigarillo cutter. Don't know what to make of the metal, and I don't see any maker's marks or markings, hallmarks. But if you see otherwise, please let me know. Leave it in the comments, the website, the dependableflame.com Facebook group. Until next time.